In this lecture, we're going to implement our submenu items for our tickets menu. So let's go back to our code, and for our index.html, for the tickets menu item, we want to go ahead and add a div underneath this span, and it's within this div that we're going to add our submenu items. So for now, let's just add something like submenu items in this div, just so we've got some text we can work with and we can actually see something rendering on the screen. So we want to give it a background pink of 500 and a position of absolute and a top of full. So if we save this now and take a look in the browser and give it a refresh, we can see now that because we've given it a position of absolute and because the tickets is position relative, so this tickets menu item is position relative and our submenu item here is position absolute, we're positioning our submenu items absolutely relative to our tickets menu item. So because we've given it a top of 100%, it means that our submenu item is now right at the bottom of this tickets menu item. So we also want to make sure that it's shifted all the way to the right hand side, and it looks like it is by default, but we want to 100% make sure that this is the case. So we can go ahead and also add, as well as a top full, we want to add a right of 0. So adding a right of 0 means that it's going to hug the right hand side here, and it's going to be flush and in line with the right hand side of this tickets menu item. So we also want to make sure that each menu item doesn't wrap onto a new line like what we've got here. Our submenu items should all be in one line. So we don't want to wrap our submenu items onto separate lines. So to do that, we can add the white space no wrap class and take a look in the browser now and give this a refresh, and there we go. Our labels are no longer wrapping on multiple lines. So if we take a look at the completed project, we can see we've got this slight border radius on the bottom. So we can target the bottom borders then and the bottom border radius by going rounded B, which stands for rounded bottom. And we can see here we're going to have a border bottom right radius and a border bottom left radius. So let's give it a rounded bottom of MD. So we'll have a 6 pixel border radius on the bottom. Let's take a look in the browser now, and there we go. We can see our subtle border radius on the bottom. And finally, we want to add a text of right. So our text will be aligned to the right hand side. So from here then, let's go ahead and add our submenu items. So let's remove this submenu items example label and let's add a div here. And within this div is going to be our first submenu item. So the first submenu item is single day ticket. And then let's just copy this div and paste it, and we want a 7-day ticket. So now we can go ahead and add some classes to both of these divs using the technique from the last lecture. If we hold down Option on Mac or hold down Alt on Windows and we click where we want to select multiple cursors, let's add some class names then. Let's go ahead and add a padding of 4 all round. Let's go ahead and add a font of bold. Let's add another background color, just like what we did for our main menu items. So on hover, let's add a background of white, and we want a slightly transparent white here. So let's give it a transparency of 5%. So we can go hover bg white /5. We want to do exactly the same as well for the text color. So let's go hover text zinc 200, just like what we did for the main menu items or the parent menu items. And again, let's go ahead and add a transition of colors and a ease in out transition. And of course, we need a cursor of pointer, so people using our site know that they can actually click on this menu item. And we want a default text color as well of text pink 200. So then when we hover over it, then we have a text zinc of 200, just like our parent menu items. So let's save this now and take a look in the browser. Let's give it a refresh. And there we go. We can see we've got our nice submenu item here. However, the submenu item is constantly open. We want the submenu item to only open whenever we hover over this tickets menu item. So this is where we can use the group selector. So just like what we've done before with the hover selector, where we're targeting the hover state, we can also add a group selector. So let's go back to our code. And what we want to do is whenever we hover over this particular menu item, so whenever we hover over this div, we want to make sure that this particular div has a display of block. Otherwise, if we're not hovering over this particular menu item, we just want the div to be hidden. So first of all, let's give it a default state of hidden. So we can add the hidden class here to display none. Then what we can do is add something called a group in Tailwind. So if we add this group class to a particular parent element or an element higher up in the DOM, then we can target this via any ancestor element. So with this div, what we can do is add group here, colon, dash, hover. So whenever we're targeting the next available group ancestor, which is obviously this particular div here because we've got a group class attached to this div. So when the next available group ancestor is hovered over, then we can go display block. So let's save this now and take a look in the browser and give it a refresh. So by default, our submenu items are hidden. So if we hover over the tickets now, we can see that our submenu item is display block. So this is because we're using the group class on this particular div, and then we can target this particular div with the group class within any descendant elements by targeting the group dash hover and then adding any available styles to this particular div based on if the group is hovered or not. So obviously we're setting a display of block whenever this particular group is hovered over. So this pretty much concludes our navbar for the desktop version of our site. So in the next lecture, let's go ahead and take a look at how we can implement a mobile version of this navbar, starting with our mobile icon with this burger icon, transitioning into a close icon. So we'll take a look at this in the next lecture.